The key to my salvation wasn't in my portfolio or in the countless job applications I'd sent. It was hidden in a dusty, forgotten photograph on my husband's desk. A picture of a man I had never met, but whose ghost would soon save me. But 3 months ago, I didn't know that. 3 months ago, my world had simply ended on a Tuesday afternoon. I remembered the shade of the sky, a flat, indifferent gray as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. My architectural models, my drafting tools, my 5 years of late nights and ambitious dreams, all reduced to a neat pile of memories. It's not personal. Amelia, my manager, David, had said, his eyes avoiding mine. The firm is restructuring. We're cutting the entire conceptual design department. He'd used words like streamlining and efficiency, but all I heard was the deafening sound of failure. Just like that, I was unmoored. The identity I had so carefully constructed. Amelia Brooks, the promising young architect, had been erased. The worst part was telling Leo. He held me as I sobbed, his embrace a familiar comfort. His words, a well-intentioned balm. We'll get through this. Ames, he murmured into my hair, his voice thick with a sympathy that felt both loving and painfully distant. You're brilliant. Another firm will snatch you up in no time. He believed it. And I wanted to believe it too. But a cold dread had already settled deep in my bones. A premonition that this was more than just a professional setback. It was a crack in the foundation of our life. And I knew exactly who would be the first to drive a wedge into it. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, arrived the next evening. She never just visited. She made an entrance. She swept into our apartment, carrying a ridiculously oversized designer handbag in one hand and a casserole dish in the other. A peace offering that felt more like a weapon. Oh, you poor dear, she cooed, placing the dish on our kitchen counter with a proprietary thud. Her eyes, sharp and critical, scanned our home, and I felt a familiar urge to shrink under her gaze. Leo told me about your little hiccup at work. Little hiccup. That's what she called the implosion of my career. It's a temporary situation. Eleanor, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I'm already updating my portfolio and reaching out to my network. She made a soft clucking sound with her tongue, a noise of feigned pity that set my teeth on edge. Of course. Dear, but the market is so terribly competitive these days. Isn't it? Especially for the more creative fields. They're always the first to go when things get tight. Leo walked in then, a strained smile on his face. Mom, Amelia is incredibly talented. She has 5 years of experience at a top firm. I know that. Darling, Eleanor said, turning her attention to him and patting his arm. The gesture was meant to look affectionate, but I saw it for what it was, a reassertion of her primary claim on him. I'm just being realistic. Perhaps this is a blessing in disguise, a chance for her to focus on other things, important things, like making a comfortable home for you. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My career was a frivolous distraction. My real job was him. Leo's frown was a fleeting shadow. He didn't challenge her. Not really. He never did. And so the pattern began. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's visits became more frequent. Her helpful suggestions more pointed. She'd call in the middle of the day, just checking in. Dear, since you have so much free time now, I thought you might like to come help me sort through my winter wardrobe. She'd bring clippings of job openings for administrative assistants and receptionists, just to tide you over. Of course, we can't have you feeling unproductive. Each comment was a carefully polished stone, thrown with a gentle hand but designed to bruise. I found myself becoming smaller, quieter. The confident woman who could command a boardroom with her designs was replaced by a wife who spent her days endlessly scrolling through job postings. the glow of the screen reflecting the growing vacancy in her own eyes. The breaking point, the moment a flicker of fight returned, was born of dust and neglect. It was a Saturday. Another long, empty day. Leo was out with friends, and the silence of the apartment was amplifying the ugly whispers of self-doubt in my head. To escape them, I decided to tackle the one area of our home that was truly Leo's domain, his office. It was a cluttered mess of old textbooks, sports memorabilia, and paperwork he refused to throw away. As I wiped down a bookshelf groaning under the weight of his college years, my hand brushed against a silver picture frame, tucked away behind a stack of finance journals. I picked it up, blowing a layer of dust off the glass. The photograph was old. The colors faded to a warm sepia. In it, a younger, happier version of Leo's father, Robert, stood with his arm around another man. Robert, who had passed away when Leo was just a teenager, was an architect. Like me, a brilliant, passionate man. Eleanor had once told me in a rare moment of unguarded nostalgia, before adding a bitter addendum but a terrible businessman. He had his head in the clouds and his pockets were always empty. In the photo, Robert was beaming, his eyes full of the dreamer's fire I recognized in my own reflection. The man beside him was tall and sharp, even in his youth, with a kind smile but eyes that held a keen intelligence. I felt a strange jolt, a flicker of recognition I couldn't place. When Leo came home, I showed it to him. He squinted at the image. Wow, I haven't seen this in years. That's Dad. Obviously. Who's the man with him? I asked, my voice casual, belying the strange intensity I felt. Oh, that's Alex. Alexander Harrison, he said, taking the frame from me and smiling at the memory. They were inseparable back in the day. Started their first firm together right out of school. Harrison and Brooks. Architects. My heart skipped a beat. Harrison. I knew that name. Dad was the artist. And Alex was the business brain. Dad used to say Alex could sell a skyscraper to a man living in a tent. My mind was racing. What happened to him? To Alex? Leo shrugged, placing the photo back on the shelf, though not hiding it this time. They had a falling out. I think different visions for the company. Alex wanted to go bigger, more commercial. Dad wanted to stay small, focus on bespoke designs. Alex eventually bought him out and went on to start his own thing. Harrison Construction, I think it's called now, became some kind of real estate mogul. My blood ran cold. Harrison Construction. It wasn't just something. It was one of the largest and most prestigious development firms in the country. And it was the firm where Eleanor had clawed her way up to a senior management position over the past decade. I stared at the picture of the two young men. One, my spiritual predecessor. The other, my mother-in-law's formidable boss. A wild, desperate idea began to stitch itself together in the back of my mind. It was a long shot. A gamble based on a ghost and a faded memory. It felt manipulative, even a little cruel. For a moment, a wave of guilt washed over me. Was I really considering using the memory of Leo's father? A man I'd never met, as a pawn in this twisted game with his mother. But as I looked at the photograph, at Robert's smiling face, I didn't feel like I was using him. I felt a strange kinship, a sense of shared purpose across the years. He had been crushed by the world's pragmatism, a world Eleanor now worshipped. My plan wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, a justice he was never afforded. And I would let Eleanor, in her arrogance and cruelty, deliver it herself. The key wasn't the connection itself, but the character of the man in the photograph. I had to believe that the ambitious young man with kind eyes hadn't been entirely erased by the corporate titan he became. I had to bet my future on the ghost of a friendship. The idea, once planted, began to grow roots. It was a fragile, dangerous seedling, and I nurtured it in the silent, fertile ground of my simmering resentment. My days fell into a strange, bifurcated rhythm. To the outside world, I was adrift, a ship without a rudder. I would force myself through the motions of a job search, tailoring resumes and writing cover letters that felt increasingly hollow, the words blurring into a meaningless soup of corporate jargon. But inside, I was meticulously tending to my secret plan, a single point of focus in the chaotic sea of my unemployment. Eleanor's campaign of psychological warfare escalated, as if she sensed some internal shift in me and felt the need to reassert her dominance. She took particular delight in disparaging my field, her words always cloaked in a thin veneer of concern. I was just speaking with my friend Carol, she mentioned during one of her unannounced afternoon visits, settling into my favorite armchair as if it were her throne. Her daughter-in-law just made partner at her law firm, 32 years old. Imagine that. Such a stable, respectable profession. You know, dear, she continued, her gaze sweeping over my portfolio, which I now kept tucked away. I always worried about architecture for you. It's so subjective. All those lovely drawings. But they don't keep the lights on, do they? Real value is in concrete and steel, in projects that get built, not just dreamed about. Each word was a tiny, precise pinprick, aimed directly at my most vulnerable insecurities. I would just nod, a tight smile fixed on my face, while inside I felt my confidence crumbling to dust. The announcement of Leo's 30th birthday party became her new arena. I had wanted something small, just our closest friends. Maybe a relaxed dinner at that little Italian place he loved. Absolutely not, she declared over the phone, her voice a velvet hammer that flattened my suggestion instantly. 30 is a milestone. My son is a successful financial analyst. He deserves a proper celebration that reflects his status, not some cozy little get-together. Before I could protest, she had taken over completely. My home was no longer my own. It was a venue. My husband's birthday was no longer a personal celebration. It was a corporate networking event. Then came the master stroke. I'll help you. Of course. It's too much for you to handle on your own right now, she'd said, the implication being that I was both too fragile and too incompetent. I'll invite some of my colleagues from Harrison Construction. It will be a wonderful opportunity for you to network. Amelia, you must make an effort. Perhaps someone will have a little project for you. Something to keep you busy. The offer was coated in a thick, cloying layer of fake generosity. But the insult was sharp and clear. I was to be paraded as a charity case. My husband's unemployed wife. A project for her powerful work friends to pity. I felt a surge of hot, helpless anger, but I swallowed it down. My new, secret purpose, a cold stone in my gut. That's very thoughtful of you. Eleanor, I said, my voice, a carefully constructed mask of gratitude that cost me every ounce of my strength. My nights became my sanctuary. After Leo was asleep, I'd slip out of bed and into the living room, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the walls. I became a researcher, a strategist, an archaeologist digging through the digital ruins of a past friendship. I delved deep into the history of Harrison Construction, reading every article, every interview with Alexander Harrison. He spoke of legacy, of building things that last, of the importance of character. You can judge a person's worth by how they treat those they have nothing to gain from, he'd said in one interview for a major business journal. I read the line over and over. The words, a lifeline in the dark. This was the man I was counting on. I found photos of him online, comparing the smiling young man in Leo's frame to the powerful CEO he had become. The kindness in his eyes seemed to remain, albeit behind a new wall of corporate steel. He was a man who valued loyalty, who had built an empire on a foundation of strong relationships. My plan wasn't just a desperate gamble anymore. It felt like a calculated risk. The small, critical misstep, The moment my carefully constructed hope shattered came a week before the party. During a planning call, Eleanor was listing the RSVPs, her voice dripping with self-importance. And of course, Alexander Mr. Harrison has confirmed he'll be stopping by. It's so wonderful how he supports his senior staff. My heart hammered against my ribs. My throat went dry. This was my chance. Harrison, I said, forcing a casual tone I did not feel. That's so funny. Leo's father used to have a partner with the same name. They had a small firm together. Years ago. Harrison and Brooks. Architects. I held my breath, praying the spark would catch. There was a beat of icy silence on the other end of the line. For a thrilling moment, I thought my gambit had worked. I imagined her making the connection, mentioning this charming coincidence to her boss. But Eleanor's response was a splash of Arctic water. "Oh, that," she said, her voice laced with a dismissiveness that felt like a physical blow. "Robert's little hobby firm. Honestly, Amelia, it's best not to bring up those old failures. It was a lifetime ago. Mr. Harrison is a titan of industry now. I doubt he even remembers those insignificant little projects. It would be utterly embarrassing for everyone if you were to mention it." The line went dead, and my hope plummeted. She hadn't just missed the connection, she had actively severed it. She saw her late husband's past, not as a foundation but as a flaw. A stain to be hidden from the powerful man she so desperately wanted to impress. My carefully laid plan, my one hope of salvation, seemed to have crumbled into dust. For 2 days, I was paralyzed by a thick, suffocating despair. I didn't leave the apartment. I stared blankly at my portfolio, the elegant lines and bold concepts of my designs seeming to mock me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a dreamer, chasing ghosts and building castles in the air. But as I stood in front of my closet on the morning of the party, the dread began to curdle into a grim resolve. I looked at the brightly colored dresses Eleanor had suggested I buy cheerful, desperate to please outfits, and pushed them aside with a feeling of revulsion. Instead, my hands found a simple, elegant black dress. It was a dress that felt like armor. It was understated. Professional. The kind of dress an architect would wear to a gallery opening. It was a quiet declaration of who I was. Even if the world, and Eleanor, only saw me as who I wasn't. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The fear was still there, lurking in the shadows of my eyes. But now it was joined by something else, the cold, hard glint of determination. My plan might have failed, but I would not. I would face this night not as a victim, but as myself, and I would let the pieces fall where they may. Eleanor wanted to stage a public execution of my spirit. She had no idea I was walking in ready to let her build her own gallows. The party was a performance, and Eleanor was its director. She had swept through our apartment earlier that day, rearranging furniture with a swift, dismissive authority. Our comfortable, lived-in space was transformed into something cold and sterile, like a hotel lobby designed to impress, not to be lived in. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, a flower I hated, a fact she knew well, and the low hum of polite, corporate chatter. She greeted each of her colleagues with a voice that was an octave higher than usual, a saccharine melody of false modesty and overt pride. "Oh, you must meet my son, Leo," she gushed repeatedly, pulling him away from his own friends to present him to her coworkers. "He's a senior analyst at Morrison Associates. So incredibly proud of him." She presented him like a prize-winning stallion, a testament to her own superior genetics and upbringing. When she introduced me, the warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by a cool, dismissive tone. "And this is his wife, Amelia. Just Amelia. No profession. No identity beyond my connection to him. I was an accessory. A silent footnote to her son's success story." I tried to fade into the background. My black dress, a small piece of camouflage in the crowded room. I busied myself refilling drinks and clearing plates, becoming a ghost in my own home. But Eleanor wouldn't allow it. She would summon me from across the room for meaningless, performative tasks. Amelia, dear, could you bring Mrs. Henderson another glass of Chardonnay? She finds the Sauvignon Blanc a bit too acidic. Each request was a public demonstration of my new domestic role, a reinforcement of the narrative she was spinning. Her colleagues, polished and professional, offered me tight, pitying smiles. I could see the judgment in their eyes. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see, a woman adrift, a pretty but unproductive burden, supported by her successful husband and his formidable mother. The entire dynamic of the room shifted when Mr. Peasant, Harrison, arrived. He was exactly as I had pictured him from the articles, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, with a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He moved with a quiet confidence that made Eleanor's frantic, attention-seeking energy seem all the more pathetic. "Alexander," she practically sang, rushing to the door as if royalty had arrived. "I'm so thrilled you could make it. It means the world to Leo. Happy to be here." "Eleanor," he said, his voice a calm, deep baritone that effortlessly cut through the noise. He shook Leo's hand warmly. "Your mother speaks very highly of you at the office. Congratulations on your birthday." His eyes did a polite scan of the room, and for a heart-stopping second, they met mine. I saw a flicker of polite curiosity. And then, something more. A slight furrow of his brow. A moment of faint, subconscious recognition as he registered my face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, dismissed before it could form into a coherent thought. My desperate hope that he might see some physical resemblance to his old friend in me, or in Leo, died. A swift death. Eleanor was right. He didn't remember. I watched, my stomach twisting into a cold knot, as she led him around the room, making introductions. She was in her element, basking in the reflected glory of his presence. Then, I saw her eyes find me across the crowded space. A predatory gleam entered them, the look of a wolf closing in on its cornered prey. This was it, the grand finale she had been building towards all night. The execution. "Alexander," she called out, her voice slicing through the party chatter, intentionally drawing all attention to her. "There's one more person I'm simply dying for you to meet." She glided towards me, her boss in tow, a queen leading a visitor through her court. Every head turned. The low murmur of conversation sputtered and died. The room fell into a sudden, expectant hush. She reached me and placed a hand on my arm. Her grip was surprisingly tight, her manicured nails digging slightly into my skin, a physical anchor for my public humiliation. Her smile was a terrifying rictus of triumph. "Mr. Harrison," she announced, her voice resonating with theatrical importance. "I'd like you to meet my daughter-in-law, Amelia Brooks." I opened my mouth to say hello, to offer a polite, meaningless platitude that might somehow deflect what was coming. But she wasn't finished. She paused, a masterful manipulator, letting the silence stretch, ensuring every eye in the room was fixed on my burning face. Right before she delivered the killing blow, I saw it. Her eyes flickered towards Leo, who was watching from across the room with a confused frown. For a fraction of a second, her triumphant expression faltered, a shadow of something complex and painful grief. Resentment. A bitter memory passed over her features. It was the ghost of her dead husband, the dreamer she both loved and despised, reflected in the face of her son. The moment passed as quickly as it came. She hardened her expression, her resolve strengthened by that flash of old pain, and she leaned in as if sharing a delicious secret with the entire room. "She's currently a failed architect playing house," Eleanor declared, her voice dripping with a venomous pity that was far crueler than open hatred. "A dreamer who couldn't build a stable career to save her life." The words landed like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the sound from the room. I heard a wineglass clink sharply, as someone set it down too hard on a glass table. My vision tunneled, the faces of the guests blurring into a collage of shock, pity, and discomfort. Humiliation, hot and acidic, rose in my throat, choking me. This was worse than being fired. This was a public vivisection of my soul, performed by the one person who should have been family. But then, I forced myself to look at Mr. Mises. Harrison. I had expected to see polite discomfort, perhaps a flicker of pity that would have been its own kind of death. Instead, his face was a mask of cold fury. The polite warmth in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by chips of ice. His jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle jumped in his cheek. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was locked on Eleanor, and it was utterly glacial. He looked at her as if she were a stranger, something vile and unrecognizable. He took a deliberate step back from her, a small movement that felt like a chasm opening between them. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried through the dead silence of the room like a shard of glass. "Eleanor," he said, his tone lethally calm. "You're fired." The two words hung in the air, vibrating with a terrible, irrevocable finality. Eleanor's face, which had been flushed with victory, went bone-white. Confusion, then disbelief, then pure, unadulterated terror washed over her features. Her perfectly painted mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for air. What she finally stammered, her voice a pathetic squeak that was swallowed by the silence. "I mean precisely what I said, Mr." Harrison replied, his voice unwavering. Each word a hammer blow. "Clean out your desk on Monday morning. Security will escort you from the building." The room erupted into a flurry of frantic whispers. Leo, his face, now a mask of crimson rage, started moving towards us. Eleanor, desperate, tried to laugh it off, a horrifying, choking sound that died in her throat. "Oh, Alexander. Such a joker. You know I was only teasing Amelia. A little family ribbing." "Mr." Harrison shook his head slowly, his cold gaze never leaving her face. "There was nothing funny about what you just said, Eleanor. It was cruel, unprofessional, and utterly contemptible. To humiliate a member of your own family, in her own home. It reveals a profound lack of character. A lack of character I will not have representing my company." He then turned his gaze to me, and for the first time that night, the ice in his eyes thawed, replaced by a look of genuine regret and empathy. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice softening, the use of my formal surname now ringing with significance. "I am profoundly sorry. No one deserves to be treated that way." He knew, in that moment, as he emphasized my name, I knew he had finally made the connection. Brooks. The name had registered. This wasn't just about corporate values. This was personal. This was for Robert. The chaos that followed was swift and merciless. "Mr." Harrison's words had shattered the fragile social contract of the party, and no one wanted to be near the shrapnel. Eleanor's colleagues, who had been orbiting her all evening, suddenly found urgent reasons to leave. They offered quick, awkward goodbyes to Leo and me, their eyes avoiding Eleanor as if she were a contagious disease. I saw Mrs. Papel, Henderson, grab her husband's arm, whispering furiously, and they were out the door in seconds. Within 10 minutes, the room was empty, save for the three of us. Standing amidst the wreckage of a celebration, Eleanor, who had been frozen in place, finally slumped onto our couch, her head in her hands. The proud, tyrannical matriarch was gone, replaced by a defeated woman. But when she lifted her head, her eyes were not filled with remorse. but with a pure, chilling hatred. All of it directed at me. "This is all your fault," she hissed. Her voice, a venomous whisper. "You and your pathetic failures. You couldn't just be grateful. You had to come into my son's life and ruin everything. Everything. Before I could even react." Leo stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. The man who had spent years placating and sidestepping his mother's cruelty was gone. In his place stood a stranger. A man with a spine of steel and fire in his eyes. "Enough," he roared, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You did this. Not Amelia. Not anyone else. You. You chose to be cruel. You chose to humiliate my wife in our home. You built this disaster. Brick by ugly brick. And now you are going to live in it." Eleanor stared at him, her face a mask of shocked betrayal. "Leo. Sweetheart. You don't understand. I was trying to motivate her. I was trying to help our family." Help. Leo's laugh was a harsh, bitter sound. "You called my wife a failure in front of your boss to make yourself look powerful. You have never, not once, tried to help. You've only ever tried to control. Well, that's over. As of tonight, it is over." He took my hand, his grip firm and unwavering. "Get your things. Mom, it's time for you to go." The weeks that followed were strange. A quiet peace settled over our apartment. The absence of Eleanor's toxic presence like the lifting of a low-grade fever. Leo and I talked for hours. Truly talked. For the first time in years, he apologized. Not for his mother, but for himself. For all the times he had stood by and let her poison our lives. For his weakness. For his fear. And I forgave him. Because I had seen him become the man I always knew he could be. Our marriage, which had been slowly eroding under the constant acid rain of Eleanor's disapproval, began to heal. We were a team now. 2 weeks after the party, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Alexander Harrison. My heart leaped into my throat. He was requesting a meeting. I went in terrified, expecting an awkward conversation. Perhaps an offer of a low-level job out of pity. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair opposite his vast desk. The city skyline spread out behind him like a kingdom. "I want to apologize again for what happened in your home." He paused, his expression serious. After that night, I couldn't get the name Brooks out of my head. I dug up some old files. "Your father-in-law, Robert. He was a brilliant man. A true artist. I was the pragmatist. And he was the soul of our firm. When we went our separate ways, I always regretted it. I built a successful company. But I think he built more beautiful things." Tears pricked my eyes. He would have liked hearing that. "His name, Mr. Harrison continued, leaning forward, is what made me look you up. But your talent is what made me call you in. I spent hours going through your online portfolio. Your work is innovative, bold, and exactly what this company needs. We have a position opening for a senior design lead. I'm not offering it to you out of sympathy, or as a favor to Robert's memory. I am offering it to you because you are, without a doubt, the best candidate for the job." I walked out of that building in a daze, the job offer clutched in my hand, a salary 30% higher than my old one. I cried in my car for 10 minutes, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, cathartic release. Life changed. I thrived in my new role, my creativity unleashed. Leo and I grew closer than ever, our partnership fortified by the fire we had walked through. News of Eleanor, however, came in grim. Secondhand reports from Leo. Her professional reputation was shattered. In the tight-knit world of commercial development, the story of her public cruelty had spread like wildfire. No one would hire her. She had been forced to sell her expensive condo and was living off her dwindling savings in a small rental. Leo had tried to help her, but his offers were met with bitter accusations and demands that he choose between me and her. He finally stopped trying. 3 months after I started my new job, Eleanor called Leo and asked if I would meet her for coffee. I went. Not for her, but for him. The woman sitting across from me in the quiet cafe was a stranger. The power suit was gone, replaced by a simple, worn sweater. Her hair wasn't perfectly coiffed. She looked older, smaller, and profoundly tired. She stared into her cup for a long time before she spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice quiet and raspy. "What I did, it was unforgivable." She finally looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Every time I looked at you, so full of passion for architecture, I saw him. I saw Robert. I loved him, but I also resented him for his dreams, because they never paid the bills. I was terrified you and Leo would struggle like we did, so I tried to break you. I was jealous of your talent, and I was jealous of how much my son loves you. It was monstrous. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was tangled up in her own pain and excuses, but it was real. And looking at the broken woman before me, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a wave of pity. Her lifelong obsession with status and control had cost her everything that truly mattered. "We can try to move forward, Eleanor," I said carefully. "But things will be different." She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I know." Now, 6 months later, I sit in my own office, on the 34th floor of the Harrison Tower. From here, I can see the whole city. It's a city I am now helping to shape, with designs that are bold and full of soul. Just like Robert's, my greatest humiliation became the catalyst for my greatest triumph. Eleanor's cruelty, meant to destroy me, had inadvertently liberated me, strengthened my marriage, and handed me the career of my dreams. Justice doesn't always come in the way you expect. Sometimes, it comes through the very person who sought to deny it to you. If you've ever felt like your world was falling apart, or if you've ever had to stand up to someone who tried to make you feel small, I hope this story reminds you of your own strength. Sometimes, our worst days are just setting the stage for our best ones to begin. Let me know in the comments about a time you found strength you didn't know you had. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about finding justice in the most unexpected places.